Well, hello everybody. Welcome to P.B.M. Money. Today we're going to talk about leases. Sounds kind of boring, I know. But if you're going to have tenants, you're going to need a lease. I suggest. Some people try to rent with no leases, and we're going to get into why they're important and why you should have them, even though leases were designed to protect tenants, not landlords, and you need to remember that. The lease is designed to spell out all the things that are going on in the lease. The rent, the security deposit, how long it is, the date you started, blah, blah, blah. That all protects the tenant so that the landlord can't change the rules mid-game and then evict them because they're not adhering to the new rules. So, are leases a good idea? Even though they protect the tenants, the answer to that is yes, and here's why. If the tenant breaks any of those covenants in the lease, the landlord, by the lease, has the right to evict and take to court and sue for money that they owe. Now, is it expensive? Yes. Do they normally pay? No. But some will, especially if they have a good job, and that's why renting to qualified people up front is important. Make sure they have a decent job so that if they do squelch, you can garnish their wages. Now remember, when it comes to tenants or any contract, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So you can tell the tenant anything you want, but if you go to court and it's not in writing, it doesn't matter what you said. Now, you can make the argument about an oral contract, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, go prove that. A judge will laugh you out of the courthouse. Unless you're a tenant. If you're a tenant and you say, but he said blah, 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 I live in a blue state and the blue judges will believe the tenant and screw the landlord every time. That's fact. So you need to know that depending on what state you live in. Now, how can we take a lease that's designed to protect the tenant and use it to protect the landlord? Well, there's something called addendums. An addendum to any contract is add-ons. You have the original lease and then you do addendums and say, well, these are things that I want that are different, that are special, that are things that are going to happen in this lease, and you can either sign it or not. If you don't, I'm not renting to you, but if you do, you are now on the hook. And I put as many of those in there to protect me as I can, and each time I get burned, I add another addendum. Now, some of the ones that I do is lawn care and snow removal. I own single-family houses, and that's an important issue. When I did this many years ago, I didn't know about addendums, and people would let the grass grow, and I'd get fined from the city, and harassed, and notices, and it was a big pain. So now I put an addendum in the contract, and I tell them, you are responsible for lawn care and snow removal, and if you don't, and I get fined, or I have to pay to have somebody to do that, I'm charging you. And if you don't pay, I'm taking it out of your security deposit, and if there's nothing left there, I'm suing you. So you need to know that. Lawn care and snow removal. Now, trash, I voluntarily pay for this one, and this is because most tenants will not pay for their own trash removal. They think that's a waste of money. And I know this because when I was in the business many years ago, I can't tell you how many basements and bedrooms and crawl spaces I cleaned out because people threw their garbage in there because they didn't want to pay, $40 every 3 months or whatever it is. So I ended up cleaning it. So now I voluntarily pay for trash, and I tell them when pickup is, and I've had no issues so far. As long as you pay for it, they'll take care of it. Another thing that I do is the utility letter. Nobody gets keys to a house until I have proof in my hand that the utilities have been switched over into their name, because I had an apartment building one time that was in a small town, and it was a pretty decent sized apartment building, and people were skipping out on their utilities, you know? So the city council passed an ordinance that applied only to me and my property. And it said that I was going to be personally responsible and liable for all my tenants' utilities. I did not do that. I'm not going to do that, and I never did do that. I ended up selling the property and getting out of that, and it turned out to be a blessing. I'm glad I did that. But at the time, I thought, how can they make something to go against me? I went to my attorney, and he said they can do whatever they want to do. The question is, do you have the money to take them to court to fight it? Well, isn't that nice? Our legal system at work. Another addendum I put in is late fees. You have to spell out the late fees, because if you go to court and there's nothing in there about late fees, you don't get late fees. Another one is bed bugs. This wasn't a big deal around here until about 5 or 6 years ago, and every place in this town every hotel in town is infected with bed bugs to one degree or another. And I haven't found it in any of my houses yet, but it's coming. But that addendum says this place has been inspected and sprayed. There's no bed bugs. If there are any, you are responsible, and you will be charged to treat this. Another addendum I put in is a new carpet addendum. If I replace the carpet or flooring in a house, it's in writing. It's new carpet. So if there's a stain when they move out, they can't say, well, that was here when I got here. No, no, no. You sign an addendum right here that says this was new carpet and you stained it. You will be charged for that. Another one is a pet deposit. I have a non-refundable pet deposit. And I had one girl that moved in and moved out in a month. And I let her out. I mean, there was circumstances, and I let her go. And I didn't sue her, pursue her, or charge her, but I did keep her non-refundable pet deposit. Because she had a big dog. And that big dog was in that house for a full month. And I did end up replacing the carpet, by the way. And there's also a pet addendum in there where they're charging an extra amount each month just to have the pet there. Another one is the smoking. Now you might think that's not right, but there are some apartment complexes that are non-smoking. It's a fire hazard, and it stinks the house, it stains the walls and the ceiling, so I put an addendum in my leases, no smoking. If you want to smoke, step outside. Now, can I enforce that? No. But if they go to move out and I can tell they've been smoking, I can sue them and take that out for all the cleaning of the carpets and painting of the walls and all that, because they broke the contract. Drugs. Even though pot is legal in this state, I don't want that in my house or around my property because of the same reason. It leaves a certain resin on the walls and the ceilings, and it's tough to get out, and it stinks up the carpet. No drugs in my apartments or my houses. Another one that I do is license plates. I always get the license plate numbers of every vehicle they own, so that if I find out there's other people living there or there's other cars with different license plates there, they will be charged. If you're paying rent for 2 people to live there and I find out there's 4 people living there, I'm going to double your rent. And you need to know that. We're not going to play this, rent it to one and have 37 people living in a bedroom. No, 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 no. That will tear my property apart. And another one that I use, and this is the last one I want to talk on, but another one I use is you need to notify me if you're having a guest. If you're going to have a guest spend a night, I don't want to be bothered with that. But if it's going to be longer than a night, I need to know for several reasons. Number one, if there's anybody else in the neighborhood that I might know that sees an extra car there, they might call the cops. And I also need to know because of the license plate number. If I drive by and I see an extra car there and you have not notified me that there's a guest there, I'm going to charge you. Now, I know these sound a little harsh, but think about what happens if you don't do that. Like if you have a guest over, that's twice as many. If you live there by yourself and you have a guest, that's twice as many people that I rented to. That's twice as much wear and tear on my property, twice as much everything. And if they have a pet, that's twice as much damage to my carpet and my walls. I need to protect myself. Now remember, the lease was designed to protect the tenant. You can't change the rent, you can't change the fees, you can't change the address, you can't kick them out. All kind of protections for them. We need to protect ourselves from the tenants. Because it's not just the landlords that are out to get the tenants. The tenants are out to get the landlords, and we have to protect ourselves. The lease protects both of us. It protects them for their leasing, and the addendums also protect them so that they, if they can prove they didn't do whatever it is I'm charging them with, then I lose the whole thing. But you have to have this in writing, and you have to be able to show it to a judge. If you're going to sue for rent plus late fees, you better have late fees in your contract. And if you're going to sue them for extermination of bed bugs, you better have an addendum in there, because if you don't, bed bugs might be considered an act of God, and the court might throw that out. But if you have it in writing and they agreed to it, there's no wiggle room there. Well, that's my look at leases. I think they're a double-edged sword. They protect the tenant, but if we design those leases to protect at least some of our rights, then I think it's a double-edged sword, and we can cut both ways. I think they're important. They are definitely needed if you go to court, but they also are restrictive if you get bad tenants. So that's all I want to talk about. You guys have a great day, a great week, and happy investing.